In our view, going forward, whether it is this year or over the next 5 years, the twin themes of gradual fiscal consolidation and continued push on public capex is likely to continue. It's highly possible that we might see some increase in spend, whether it takes the form and shape of increased rural spend or special financial assistance package for the states of the key allies. Those possibilities clearly exist, but there is a very decent buffer available to absorb any such increase. In our estimate, the buffer which the government has today is of 0.5% of GDP. This has primarily come on three counts. One, the Reserve Bank of India this time has given a much larger than expected dividend flow to the government. Secondly, when the finance minister presented her budget in February, she has kept almost 0.2% of GDP worth of allocation with herself for providing towards new schemes. So that's another part. The last part is that this time they are likely to have lesser time to spend the 11 lakh crores of capex which was announced in the Feb budget. So there is a possibility of an inevitable savings on expenditure. And this buffer, in our view, is more than enough to take into account any increased spending, whether it is in the form of higher rural spend or special financial assistance to states. So net-net, in FY25, when the final budget is presented in July, our view is that the 5.1% target will be adhered to. And even over the next 5 years, our sense is the twin themes of fiscal consolidation with a push on public capex is unlikely to change. So let me break it down in a few segments. First is the known increase. We already know that the food subsidy bill in the July budget is likely to be larger than the February budget. This is primarily likely to come because the government this time would procure more to beef up their stocks. The second part is the unknown one. And this can again take, I'll break it down in two parts. One is potential increases in spends to boost consumption. We all know rural demand has been staying weak. Possibly the middle income segment needs a little bit of a push. So it's possible that we might see increased spend on these. Today, if we look at the farmer income scheme, a typical farmer gets 3 installments in a year of 2,000 rupees each. Maybe the government plans to add yet another installment in making it 4 in a year rather than 3. Middle income, maybe 15 lakhs and less, maybe they get a little bit of a tax relief. So these are possible measures which the government might take to boost consumption. The second part is a slightly more tricky because the government might have to give special financial assistance package to the states of key allies. The size is not known, but I think whether we look at consumption spend increase or special financial assistance package, we don't think it will be large enough to push the government away from the 5.1% target. There is a buffer of 0.5 to 0.6% of GDP, and these should be able to take into account any such increases for fiscal year 25. As economists, we just need not to focus on next 12 months. We need to focus on the medium term, and the finance minister has always been looking at the fiscal deficit numbers, not from the context of just 12 months, but from a medium-term perspective. There is a buffer which can take care of increased spending. Going forward, there are few other buffers which can help the government to manage these spend increases. These spend increases are likely to be more in the form of permanent increases. For instance, if a tax break is given, it will remain this year, it will remain for next several years to come forth. But there are few buffers which in our view can still be used to ensure that the fiscal deficit consolidation path remains intact. For instance, the divestment proceeds, they can be used next year or years after to manage these higher spends. The tax to GDP ratio has been increasing, and our sense is that is likely to also provide some buffer. Last but not the least, there is a new revenue source which will get unlocked for the government to manage these spends from a medium-term perspective. Today, if you look at the cess collection, the GST cess collection, it's a very sizable amount, 0.4% of GDP. It goes today to pay back debts which the government raised during the COVID years. This debt repayment will be over next year. So this whole new source of revenue, which is 0.4% of GDP, which is unavailable for spends, is going for debt repayment, will become available from fiscal year of 27. So that, in our view, will help the government to stay on the path of fiscal consolidation and move towards a fiscal deficit target of 4.5% or lower in the years to come ahead. Such increases in spend, which is intended to give a boost to consumption, we have a multiplier impact on economic activity, and it is usually close to 1. So if we are talking about a consumption boost of say 0.3 or 0.4% of GDP, a similar amount of impact will be seen on overall economic activity or GDP. So that will definitely play out. Having said that, in our view, when we are looking at the revival of consumption demand over next 12 months or 18 months, the heavy lifting will be done by monsoons. Monsoons are extremely important in India, and let me just highlight few statistics which indicate why monsoons are important. 45% of Indian labor force is employed in the agricultural sector. So if you get one bad monsoon, you understand the impact which it can have on income generation capacity. Look at it from a different lens. We all know India is an economy which is driven by household demand. And 50% of this demand comes from rural India. A typical agricultural household generates close to 40% of its income by selling of agricultural produce. Now, if we have had 3 bad crops, which has been the case, and as a farmer, I am able to sell lesser amount of output, income has definitely taken a hit. So if monsoons revive over next, over the next few months, and we see a good crop output, I think that will be extremely critical when we are talking about consumption revival on a sustained basis. So yes, a combination of government expenditure, but with a much larger role of monsoon revival, in our view, will be key to push consumption demand at a much more sustainable level. Right now, there is a big wedge. GDP is at 8%, consumption is at 4%. We think that wedge can close if we see both these factors playing side by side.